As great as Caitlin Clark was in her rookie season, she, of course, was not perfect. And there are aspects of her game she can improve on. I mean, the most notable thing that I pointed out was when she would pass up shots in the mid range and developing that mid range game, that floater game, I thought was paramount to unlocking the rest of her game. Because from deep, while she could shoot better from three than she did in her rookie season, we know she's comfortable there. She finished at a great clip around the rim, and then she's a brilliant passer and distributor. I think having better defensive teammates will help her on that end. And then I've already talked about the upgraded coach, which was slept on a little bit or has been slept on a little bit because it happened so long ago. But Stephanie White will have different ideas on how to use Caitlin Clark, including putting her off ball at sometimes, so she can come around and give the defense a different look, maybe catch and shoot. And then, of course, you put the ball in her hands and let her cook. But there's no doubt that Clark has been putting in the necessary work in the lab, and that's why I expect her to be an MVP, really the MVP. But to the point I was saying about Stephanie White, she was on with the Good Follow show, Rosgold Unwoode, and this is what Stephanie White had to say. Another reason to believe in the boost of the fever and the mind of the person behind the decisions on the floor who will be, on the sidelines.
Caitlin Clark, you have a generational talent. Sometimes that word is thrown around, but I think it's really fitting here. What aspects of her game would you like to work with her on for this season?
Yeah, I mean, certainly getting stronger was one. The level of physicality in the W is totally different. That's the way that teams have to try to keep her off balance, keeping a low center of gravity. There are times where she plays a little bit upright, making sure core strength and her ability to move with time under tension and stay in a low center of gravity is important. I think from just a straight basketball perspective, making sure that we help her diversify her finishing ability, diversify in the way that it's not predictable, to be able to be equal in terms of production and facilitation going right and left, to be able to have different types of finishing looks, whether it's, crossbody finishes, whether it's floaters at the rim, whether it's quick floaters, long floaters, Euros. You can't quite be as fundamentally predictable with as much athleticism, speed, quickness, and as much as the game plan is going to be geared toward her. And then I think the challenge for us as coaches is how do we get a rest when she's on the floor while she's playing, right? Like while she's on the floor. And some of that's going to be playing off ball, utilize her as a screener, getting her into action on the third and fourth side instead of the first and second, where it's easy to game plan against. How we use her to help everybody else be better off the ball. We know how great she is with the ball in her hands. We're not going to take that away, but we've got to be able to diversify a bit in how we use her. So from those kind of challenges as well. I mean, we've got like a short-term kind of list and we got a long-term kind of list, but Caitlin, I remember from the very first day when we were working on balance and we were working on footwork and we were looking at all those things from day one to day two, she had it.
Wow.
Like she's a perfectionist and she wants it and she's going to work on it. So that long list might get shorter every day we're in practice.
So you can just hear the basketball intelligence coming from Stephanie White, and I'll link the full show in the description. I did some shows on Sirius XM with Roz in the past. We had a great time when we did shows together, so congratulations to her on what she's doing now as well. But with Caitlin Clark, basically Stephanie White said some of what I said. And what happened last year is Christy Sides had this offense where she was thinking we're going to work inside out. And it was very traditional or old school. And it didn't exactly maximize Caitlin Clark. Then when things didn't go so well, eventually Sides relented and just kind of gave Clark the keys. And Clark monopolized the entire offense, which is effective, of course, but it is the same thing you're seeing every time. Talk about that predictability. It's the same thing every time she's coming, so the defense knows what to expect. Now, when you can get out in transition, and I think they added the weapons to do that with Howard blitzing down the floor, and obviously Mitchell blitzing down the floor, and Turner was probably going to run down the floor, and Bonner knows how to run down the floor, and Cunningham likes to run down the floor. That's going to, you can't prepare for that. That's like, okay, heads on a swivel, we got to pick up. But once the defense is set, giving them the same look every time can be a bit predictable. So that's where getting Clark in motion makes a lot of sense. Also, what she's saying about getting her a rest while she's on the floor. If Clark has the ball every time and is asked to create and then is asked to defend on the other end, that's just beyond the scope of human ability. You're not being fair to someone to expect them. They're going to get gassed if they're creating every time on the ball and then have to play defense. So yeah, she sits down and Colson comes in or whatever the look is, but also get her off the ball for a bit. She can rest, maybe get some easy shots. And then you talk about the aspects of her game to improve upon, the same things I said, because there were times you saw Clark in the lane and sort of get stuck in no man's land. She needs those pet moves, those pet finishes. The way it is, or the way it was, she liked to go left, fade left on the three. I guess for the camera, I'd be going that way, and attack to the right on the drives. But so if she can start to go left on the drives and fade to the right on the threes, those are just small tweaks. But then, again, the different array of finishes, maybe a little pet move, a little pet floater, little pet ways she finishes around the rim, keeping that Steve Nash dribble going along the baseline to keep the possession alive, find her teammates. Clark, you can't doubt her work ethic. You can't doubt her skill and ability, and you can't doubt her court vision. So all that's going to come naturally and easy to her, especially with the upgrade in teammates. So those are all things that I think you'll see her improve upon, and her improving upon anything is a huge warning for the rest of the WNBA, as good as she was as a rookie. But the expectation should be that the rookie year is the worst she's going to be. And I think White will challenge her more on defense. Clark is a smart defender. I don't think she's a liability on defense. When she gets a chance to man up, she's strong and plays defense really well that way. She's not so quick laterally to stay in front of the best, but also part of that can be being gassed. I think one thing that Clark doesn't get enough credit for is her athleticism. She is a freak athlete. She's a freak athlete. The way she's able to go endurance-wise, how strong she is. I mean, she was the best guard finishing at the rim last year. I believe she finished at the rim better than Asia Wilson last year. That's how strong she was, even when she's putting on the strength. But that's to deal with contact. That's to deal with off-platform finishes. But you saw what Clark did as a soccer player, right? Like, to be as good as she was as a soccer player, as good as she is as a basketball player, that is natural athletic ability that she probably gets undersold on a little bit in part of the same reason people assess her popularity for, right? But she's got a new coach who knows what to do. That coach went against her, knew what her weaknesses were, knew what her strengths were, knew you can't just stop her, but knew the best way to contain her. And now knows the best way to make it so she cannot be contained.